Chaim Moshe Alperowitz was one of the Choshev Tmimim in Lubavitch. Later years, he moved to Eretz Yisrael in the year of Tov Reish Tzadik Hey. He first settled in Yerushalayim. Tov Shin Ches, he moved to Ramat Gan, and in his last years, he lived in Bnei Brak. Chaim Moshe was famous in Lubavitch to be a big oived who davened for many hours. Reb Mendel Futterfass once related that when he was a kid in Kremenchuk, he used to like listening to the conversations of the older Tmimim who came from Lubavitch. Every Shabbos afternoon, says Reb Mendel, I would come with my friends to yeshiva, and we'll hang out listening to the Tmimim. One day, the news came that the Tsar was murdered, and the whole entire city was talking about it. And people were scared, and were talking about what's going to happen now. That Shabbos, I walked to yeshiva as usual, and I bumped into two Tmimim in the courtyard speaking to each other. One of them was Chaim Moshe. So the other Bacher asked Chaim Moshe, did you hear? They murdered the Tsar, and there is no king anymore. So Chaim Moshe's natural reaction was, what? Where are we going to have Mishalim and Chassidus for Sfiras HaMalchus now? Now that we don't have a king, we're not going to have a Mashal for Malchus anymore. That was his natural reaction. The only thing that bothered him about the fact that the king was killed was the fact that there's no Mashal for Malchus. Rabbi Yoel Khan once related, Chaim Moshe was a sheichet. When he came to Eretz Yisrael, he refused to shecht because he didn't want to be masig gvul. He didn't want to take away parnasa from other sheichtim who were there already. People tried to convince him, but it didn't work. Only after the local sheichet came over to him and he told him that he actually needs help because there are too many people who want to shecht stuff and he doesn't have enough time to shecht for everyone, only then he agreed. Eventually, when everybody noticed the Yiras Shemaim of Chaim Moshe, so everybody wanted that he should shecht for them. So people started to move to Chaim Moshe instead of using the regular sheichet. When Yom Kippur came, there was a long line of people standing by Chaim Moshe's house, waiting for him to shecht their kaparis. Chaim Moshe asked his son that he should go to the other sheichet's house and check out what's happening over there. And the son came back and he told his father that over there is no line, there's barely anyone there. So Chaim Moshe took his knife and he damaged it, and he said that he's not shechting anymore. And people tried to convince him otherwise, but nothing helped. And for the rest of his life, he never shechted anymore, and he became a worker in construction sites. He would carry heavy bricks, stones. Eventually, the manager in the company, an Israeli company, saw that this worker, Chaim Moshe, together with another Lubavitcher who worked for him, were very serious people, and he had some respect and admiration for them. So he decided to give them a little bit of a lighter job, and he told them that they should just be in charge of a certain machine, which was much physically easier. However, after an hour or two of Chaim Moshe working there, he came back to the manager and he said he wants to go back to the old job. So that's what happened. He says, this work, now we're running the machine, occupies my mind. So I can't chazer any learning in my mind while I'm working. In the old job, I was able to think the whole time, think Divrei Torah. Another thing is that Chaim Moshe was very careful not to ever speak during his work because of a chash of gezel, of stealing. Because maybe if he will speak, he will do his work a little bit slower. During the War of Independence in Eretz Yisrael, he was drafted to help with making the walls of the city stronger, the city of Yerushalayim. And he later on told Reb Tzvi Greenwald that in regular times, like in usual times, I usually finish the Tehillim in 2 hours. But now, because of all the bombing, it takes me longer. In other words, the whole entire time during work is chazering Tehillim. Reb Shalom Feldman once related, Reb Chaim Moshe was once in a bar mitzvah in Kfar Chabad. And when they kept serving more and more fancy food, his face changed in an expression of the opposite of happiness. He was not very happy from all the taivas that were being served. But then eventually, when they brought ice cream to the table, he completely lost it. And he got up and he screamed, like as if they brought chazer to the Suda. And he screamed, Marozhinke, Ad Kan. Reb Shalom Feldman also once related that Reb Chaim Moshe once farbrained with a Bachim in 770 when he came to the Rebbe. And he demanded from them to serve the Eibishter not only with Ahava Zuta, the lower level of Ahava, but he should also have the higher level of Ahava, Ahava Rabbah, which in Chassidus explains, which is a very high level of Ahava, which usually belongs to Tzaddikim. So the Bachim were smirking from the fact that he was so, naive, from the fact that he's expecting from them such high levels. However, since Chaim Moshe was such a sincere person, and he interpreted their smirking in his mind as if they were arguing with him on the fact, as if they were disagreeing on the fact that Ahava Rabbah is an important thing. So he started to quote to them different Ma'amorim Chassidus that prove that Ahava Rabbah is an important thing, and Ahava Zuta is not good enough. In that same visit in 770, Reb Shalom Feldman relates, Reb Chaim Moshe participated in the gathering of Tzeirai Agudas Chabad, and he was honored to speak. Now at that time, Reb Chaim Moshe had a hard time hearing, so he couldn't really hear the speeches, but he assumed, his Chassidish assumption was that all the speeches before him were probably about Ahavas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So when he was invited up to speak, he assumed that the speech before him was probably about Ahavas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So as a continuation to the previous speech, he said, we'll just continue on the same topic, and he went on to list 3 dargas in Yira, 3 dargas in Yiras Hashem. His speech was actually not very long, was short, but it came from the depth of his heart, and during this speech he screamed out, the Rebbe was me'orer in his last mimer about Timtum HaMoyach v'Halev. We have to take off, we have to remove the Timtum HaMoyach and Timtum HaLev and clean up our mind and heart. Reb Pini Altois once asked Reb Nachum Goldschmidt, which Reb Nachum Goldschmidt was also from the Tmimim back in Lubavitch, later on in Eretz Yisrael, and he asked him, why is it that all the Tmimim in Lubavitch, eventually when they left Lubavitch and they got married and went on in life, they changed. They stayed Chassidish Yiddim, but they changed. They were not exactly as they were in Lubavitch. Except for Chaim Moshe. Chaim Moshe stayed on the same level his whole life, just like when he was in Lubavitch. That's what Reb Pini asked Reb Nachum Goldschmidt. So Reb Nachum answered, all the Tmimim, when they were in Lubavitch, they heard and internalized Lubavitch. And then when they went out to the world, they heard Olam Hazeh. So Olam Hazeh affected them. However, Chaim Moshe, when he was in Lubavitch, he heard Lubavitch. But when he left Lubavitch, for the rest of his life, he never heard anything else. So he stayed the same. Reb Chaim Moshe's son, Reb Chaim Alperowitz, once related, my brother, Reb Gershon, was sick with typhus before we left Russia. And his fever was skyrocketing, and it went worse and worse. And one day, the doctors back there in Russia told my parents that you need to prepare yourself for his passing, chas v'shalom. So the whole family were in trauma. However, my father completely disregarded the doctors, and he told them, if that's the news that you have to tell me, you could go back to your work. And when the doctors left, my father turned to the family and he said, these doctors are garnished, they are nothing. Since when did they become balabatim over a Yiddish life? The only balabas is the Eibishter. My grandfather, who was present then, and he was very tense from the whole situation, he screamed, this kid is about to pass away and you're playing games of Chassidish games. But my father just repeated his words and he said, I will send a telegram immediately to their Tate, to the father. That was the code name for the Rebbe. And I'm also accepting on myself right now 18 fasts. And my father left the house and he sent a telegram to the Rebbe, to the Fidik Rebbe. And then he came back completely calm and he said, the healing will come. And Taka, the Fidik Rebbe, telegrammed back very quickly a bracha for Refuah Shleima, and my father was very excited and he started to fast his 18 fasts. And gradually the fever of my brother Reb Gershon decreased, and my father kept fasting and davening, and within a few days my brother was completely released from the hospital. Reb Gershon, the brother who was sick, once related that later when we lived in Eretz Yisrael and my father worked in that Solel Boneh company, it's the construction company. So my father used to buy mezuzos and put them up by the entrances of the homes of the other workers, the Yiddish workers who worked with him. Once, a group of not Frumer workers walked over to my father, and the biggest one was leading them, and that biggest one was a big, strong guy, not Frum at all. He was half not dressed, and he went over to my father with all these big guys, and he demanded from him to take down all the mezuzahs. So my father picked up his eyes, and he told him in a low tone of voice, if you remove the mezuzahs, I'm not responsible for your life. As soon as my father said that, this big guy who came with this demand started to shake and disappeared with his whole group in a moment. So I went over to my father and I said, "Father, what a miracle!" So my father said, "It's not a miracle. It was dvarim hayotzim min halev, was words that came out of the heart." We'll finish off with something that Reb Chaim Moshe once said that projects, that shows his high level beruchnius. And he once said, Meil lebedibur, it's understandable that when it comes to speech, to speaking, a person could be nichshel chas v'shalom, because sometimes you could get into a conversation and somebody might ask you a question and you will answer, and without knowing, you might chas v'shalom say a lashon hara or a vak lashon hara. But machshava, thought, I am the only balabas. I am the only one in charge of my thoughts, and I have complete control over it. In other words, that it's easier to control your machshava than to control your dibur. And Take on his Matseva, it is written, and it was edited by the Rebbe, Hoya Zahir b'machshava dibur u'maisa kol yemei chayav. He was careful with machshava dibur u'maisa for his whole life. We'll finish off with a Niggun, a Hartzike Niggun from Reb Shalom Charitonov, which is called Volach וקרב פזורינו. I have asked his family members if they know for a reason why it's called וקרב פזורינו, and they said that they don't, so I don't know the reason for the name. It's like a Shmaki Niggun, and it's sung by Reb Shalom's son, Reb Shamshon Charitonov alav Shalom.
תראי יחממה ידיי
do 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 ya